On the 27th November 2014, in Calgary, in Canada, a 25-year-old woman, Shannon Medill, took her husband, Joshua Burgess' cell phone. She was going through his text messages, and she discovered that her husband was planning to divorce her so that he can marry his side chick, a lady whom he was having an affair with. Shannon had enough of her husband's infidelity, so she angrily confronted him about the affair. She kept yelling at him. Joshua could not control his feelings. He wanted her to keep quiet, so he covered her mouth with his hands. Fortunately, Shannon broke free from him by biting his hands. Joshua became so furious, so he strangled her to death. In order to escape with the murder, he dug a hole in the backyard of their home and buried her. Human beings can sometimes be so evil. This is the story of Shannon Medill. Shannon Medill was born on July 9, 1989, in Calgary, Alberta in Canada. Her father was known as David Medill, and her mother was Lisa Medill. She was the youngest of the 4 children that her parents had. Shannon had 2 brothers who were known as Brett and Tyler. Tyler was the eldest. She also had a sister who was known as Erin. While in high school, Shannon excelled at her studies. Apart from her education, she had a great passion in acting, and she would narrate multiple characters in an audiobook that she worked on. She was also a skilled musician who played 15 musical instruments, which included trombone and French horn. Shannon also performed in theatrical school. After completing her high school education, she went to the university. However, after studying for a short time, she abandoned her studies and went to pursue a career in acting. While in the acting industry, Shannon worked as a performance artist and a stand-up comedian. She frequently made the 300-kilometer trip to Edmonton for auditions and gigs. When Shannon was 21 years old, she met a man named Joshua Burgess at a party in December 2010. The two became friends and they had a lot of things in common. Soon they entered into a romantic relationship. A month later, Shannon introduced Joshua to her family. Her family liked Joshua very much and they welcomed him with open arms. They were very close to him and they trusted him deeply. After Shannon and Joshua had dated each other for 4 years, they did their wedding on the 4th May 2014 at JP House. Their marriage was perfect at the start. However, the nature of their jobs made life really tough for them, but they were determined to make their marriage work. Shannon and her husband Joshua lived under the same roof. However, they rarely saw each other because of their opposite work schedules. Joshua was working from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m., while Shannon was doing stand-up comedy and acting in the evening and overnight. In the months that followed, Shannon was busier than ever trying to make it as an actress and juggling auditions. A lot of those trips took her to Edmonton, a 3-hour drive north of Calgary. So she spent a lot of time on the road, commuting back and forth. Later on, the couple agreed to have an open marriage. Therefore, Joshua freely involved himself in a love relationship with multiple women. Shannon had even met her husband's numerous girlfriends, and she didn't object them. In return, Shannon also involved herself in sexual relations with her numerous boyfriends. Fortunately, Joshua was okay with it. Surprisingly, Shannon and her husband, Joshua, were still committed to each other emotionally. They would discuss anything that was a point of concern in their marriage, and the two were still dedicated to each other. However, as time went by, the two discovered that the open relationships that they were both engaged to were not helping their marriage. So they decided to end their open relationships so that they can focus on each other and on their marriage. So Shannon ended her sexual relationships with other men. She expected her husband, Joshua, to also do the same. Later on, Shannon got a breakthrough in her acting career. She landed a long-awaited role in acting, so she planned to meet her brother, Brett, at the Stage West Theater restaurant on the 30th November 2014, so that they can celebrate her achievement. About a week before she could celebrate her breakthrough achievement with her brother, Brett, Shannon took her husband's cell phone and she was going through his text messages. Unfortunately, she found out that her husband didn't end his sexual relationship with his multiple girlfriends. In fact, he was still seeing them. Shannon learned that her husband was planning to leave her and marry one of his girlfriends. She became extremely angry with her husband for betraying her trust. Shannon had enough of her husband, Joshua, so she planned to move out of their matrimonial home and relocate to Edmonton. On the early morning hours of November 27th, 2014, Joshua arrived home and found Shannon sitting on the couch. She began accusing him of infidelity. She called him a traitor because of his affairs. Shannon was angry with Joshua, and he broke up with him. She told him that she was disgusted by him for telling his girlfriend that he was going to dump her. Shannon told Joshua that she regretted marrying him and she didn't need him anymore, so he should just go and marry his girlfriend. Shannon was so mad, she kept yelling at Joshua. Joshua could not control his feelings anymore, so he placed his hands on her mouth to keep her quiet. But Shannon broke free, bit his hands, and continued hurling insults at him. Shannon told him she was disgusted by his touch. In a fit of rage, Joshua grabbed her by her neck and began strangling her with both of his hands. He held her neck down with a lot of force. She fought back, but Joshua overpowered her. When Joshua's hands were tired of strangling her, he continued strangling her by using a belt. He didn't stop until when he realized that she was no longer breathing. When he realized that Shannon was dead, he panicked. He tried to revive her, but he failed. He didn't want anyone to know what had happened, so he placed Shannon's body inside a plastic bin, and he covered it with plastic bottles. Shannon's body stayed in a frozen state inside the plastic bin at the backyard of their home throughout winter. When the ground thawed, Joshua dug a hole in the lawn of their home and buried Shannon in the backyard of their home. He then covered her body in dirt, branches, and concrete slabs. Finally, the long-awaited day arrived. That is 30th November 2014, the day Shannon and her brother, Brett, were supposed to meet at the Stage West Theater restaurant. It was late, and Shannon hadn't showed up, but her brother didn't think too much of it. He assumed she had been held up at the rehearsal, or she had some last-minute details to take care of. But as the evening turned into night and Shannon still hadn't shown up, Brett got worried, so he called her repeatedly, but got no response. He sent her messages and left her voicemails, but he still got no response. Later that day, her father, David Medill, texted her to remind her that she was supposed to have dinner with Brett. Unfortunately, her father received no answer from her. He called her several times, but she didn't pick up her phone. Her father began to worry. However, he assumed that maybe her daughter thought that he was furious with her, and that is why she refused to text him back or answer his calls. Meanwhile, a lot of hours had passed, and Brett hadn't seen his sister, Shannon, so he went back home. The following morning, he tried calling her again, but her phone was still silent. That same morning, her father also called her again several times, but she didn't pick up her phone, so he called Erin, who was Shannon's eldest sister. He asked her if she had contacted Shannon. When Erin said that she had not heard from Shannon, the entire family tried to reach her, but she was not answering her phone. Later on, the entire family went to the police station to file a missing person report because Shannon had been missing for hours. Shannon's husband, Joshua, also accompanied them to the police station. The family told the police that Shannon was last seen in the early morning hours, post-midnight, of Thursday, November 27th, at her home on Spiller Road. Joshua also told the police that on that night he spoke to Shannon briefly before going to bed while Shannon stayed up. However, the following morning he didn't see her, and so he assumed that she went to Edmonton for work, as usual. Her family also assumed that she had gone to Edmonton on the 27th November. However, when they reached out to her contacts in Edmonton, no one said they met Shannon that weekend. They told the police that they feared that Shannon might have been involved in a car accident because she was supposed to travel from Edmonton to Calgary. They urged the police to search for her. However, the police told the family that Shannon was an adult and she had every right to go wherever she wanted without informing them. Shannon's family pleaded with the police to help them search for her because she had been missing for long. They talked to police with so much emotions, and after much persuasion, the police agreed to search for Shannon. They looked for her at the hospitals. Unfortunately, no hospital reported any accident involving Shannon. Days went by without the police locating her whereabouts. Her husband, Joshua, informed the police that he had found Shannon's cell phone at home in the pocket of her trouser, which was in the bedroom. He also told the police that Shannon's car was parked a short distance from the house. When the detectives analyzed Shannon's cell phone records, they discovered that she was last active on social media on November 27, 2014, before 12:30 a.m. They also discovered that that was also the last day Shannon made bank transactions and used her phone. Her phone signal was traced to a city alley the following morning, after which Joshua claimed he found it at home. Upon being questioned how he found his wife's cell phone, Joshua insisted that he accidentally found it. This inconsistency raised suspicion among police officers. He was very cooperative with the police. He also allowed them into their home twice to do an investigation, but they found nothing suspicious. Sooner after, the investigators received 2 photographs which were taped to trees in Big Creek Park in Calgary, Canada. The woman on the photographs resembled Shannon, so the police launched a large-scale search operation in the park. Several search teams were assembled to help in the search. This included volunteers, Shannon's family members, and search dogs. Surprisingly, Joshua also helped in the search of his wife, Shannon. They used a helicopter to scan the vast area from above. For 2 days, the search team searched the park, but they didn't find Shannon. Soon after, the students from local college heard that the police were searching for Shannon in the park, after they saw 2 photographs of a woman who resembled her had been taken at the park. So the students went to the police station and they explained to the police that the 2 photographs of a woman who resembled Shannon at the park was actually part of an art project that they created. After the students had explained the misunderstanding caused by the unintended impact of their work, the information caused a crushing blow to Shannon's family members and the investigators who were hoping for a vital lead. Later, Joshua went to police to reveal some information that might help in finding his missing wife, Shannon. He told the police that a few months earlier, Shannon had called him in a state of distress. She told him that she wanted to jump off a bridge because she had failed another audition that she had pinned her hopes on. Joshua told the police that he was able to calm Shannon down that day. He added that maybe Shannon's old wounds had reopened and she decided to throw herself in the river. After the police heard Joshua's story, they searched the bodies of water in and around the city. They scoured every river and lake, hoping to find any clue, but they found none. By May 2015, there were still no leads in the finding of Shannon. So the case was transferred to a seasoned detective by the name of Christine White. Christine, who had over a decade of experience in homicide investigations, started by investigating those who were closest to Shannon. So she started interviewing the first person who was close to Shannon, and that was her husband, Joshua. During the interview, Joshua was open and cooperative with her. However, as the interview proceeded, Christine noticed a few subtle inconsistencies in his stories, so she launched a full investigations on him. She discovered that Joshua had an active online dating profile on the website OkCupid, and he was looking for girlfriends whom he can date. Detective Christine also discovered that Joshua and his wife Shannon were in an open marriage. Therefore, they freely had affairs with their side lovers. On June 2, 2015, a team of detectives led by Detective Christine White went to Joshua's home. They had warrants to search his house, analyze his cell phone, and impound Shannon's car. So they knocked on Joshua's door, but Joshua was delaying in opening the door. He made the detectives wait for long before opening the door. This situation made Detective Christine to suspect that Joshua was hiding something. The officers insisted to Joshua that he should open the door immediately, or else they would have to use force to break in. Joshua opened the door wearing only an underwear, and he was covered in blood. He confessed that he murdered his wife Shannon. The police examined him, and they discovered that he had used a small knife to cut his neck. So the police called the paramedics who arrived and rushed him to the hospital. The doctors assessed him medically, and they were able to determine that he hadn't cut any main artery. Joshua had lost only a bit of blood, so he didn't require a surgery. Therefore, the doctors only stitched him. After recovering from his attempt at self-harm, Joshua was sent for a psychiatric evaluation to determine whether he posed a risk to himself or others. When they found that he was okay, he was arrested by the police and he was taken to Calgary Police Headquarters for questioning. During the interrogation, Joshua was not willing to say much. When the police showed him a photo of his wife Shannon, he cried and said that he loved her and missed her. So the police gave him a night to collect himself. They would proceed with the interrogation later. Meanwhile, the police obtained another search warrant to thoroughly search his home. But this time around, they went with cadaver dogs to search Joshua's home. While there, the cadaver dogs led them to 2 shovels and the backyard. The forensic team dug through the backyard, and fortunately, by morning, they found Shannon's remains buried under layers of debris and dirt. The body was rotten and heavily decomposed. The body was taken for an autopsy, that the examiners were able to confirm that indeed the body belonged to Shannon Medill, and she died of strangulation. The police told Joshua that they had found Shannon's body. Joshua cried as he confessed to the police how he strangled his wife to death and buried her at the backyard of their home. He told the police that he buried Shannon in their backyard because he didn't want her to leave him even in death. In December 2017, prosecutors charged Joshua with second-degree murder, and he pleaded not guilty. However, on the day before this trial, he changed his plea to guilty. Joshua refused to attend the court hearings, stating that he couldn't bear to face Shannon's family. Joshua was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 10 years.